Late December 1945, a prisoner of war camp in the United States. The last day of the year arrived without ceremony. No announcement came through the translator. No special schedule was posted on the mess hall door. No change in the guard rotation was explained to them. The calendar turned anyway, as if meaning was optional. Winter had settled into the camp by now, not dramatically, not with a single storm that announced itself. It came the way it had come before, quietly, patiently. The night air sharpened first. Then the mornings, frost clung to window edges and door frames, thin white lines that caught the weak light before sunrise. Inside the wooden barracks, the women woke long before the bell rang at 6:30 a.m. They did not need the bell. Their bodies had stopped trusting sleep years ago. Sleep was a luxury that did not survive the war, not in Japan, not in the jungle hospitals, not under air raids, not in hunger, not in fear. Even here in a camp that was quieter than anything they had known, rest came lightly. It hovered, it never settled. Ko opened her eyes in the dark and stared at the ceiling, wooden boards, nails, a small crack where cold air always found its way in. She listened. The soft breathing of women around her, a cough from the far end of the room, a blanket shifting. Then the sound that always reminded her where she was, boots outside, crunching slowly across frozen ground. The night watch moving along the fence line, making rounds, not shouting, not pounding on doors, just walking. Ko lay still. Her hands rested on top of her blanket. She could feel the faint warmth trapped beneath it. She did not move because she did not want to wake anyone and because she did not know what to do with this day. December 31st. In Japan, she would have been cleaning, not out of preference, out of obligation, out of ritual, out of fear of carrying an unclean spirit into the new year. She would have scrubbed the edges of the floorboards, wiped soot from corners, shaken dust from bedding. If she had been at home, her mother would have already been awake. Hair tied back, sleeves rolled, the smell of water and soap mixing with cold air from a cracked window. There would have been purposeful movement, a sense that the year was ending and must be closed properly. In the camp, there was only stillness. Ko shifted slightly and felt the thin mattress press against the wood beneath it. She thought of tatami mats. She thought of the way the air felt in Osaka in winter, not warm, but familiar. Here the air was colder and unfamiliar in a way that made her chest tighten, not because she feared the Americans, not in the way she had feared them before capture, but because everything here made it harder to keep her mind in one shape. The bell rang at 6:30 a.m. Its sound traveled across the camp like it always did, metal against metal, unemotional, routine. The women rose quietly. Blankets were folded with precision, beds were straightened, dresses were smoothed, hair was tied back neatly. Even in captivity, discipline remained. Ko watched the others move and felt something twist inside her. In Japan, they would have been doing this with intention, cleaning away the year, making space for the next one. Here they moved because the bell had rung, because the schedule demanded it, because order was the one thing they still controlled. Outside, the compound stirred to life. American guards changed shifts, trucks rolled past carrying supplies. A distant radio played softly from somewhere near the administrative building. The women walked toward breakfast in quiet lines, their shoes crunched on frost. Their breath formed pale clouds in front of their faces. Ko kept her eyes lowered as she walked, but she noticed the small changes anyway. She always noticed. It was what had kept her alive. A cluster of American soldiers stood near the recreation hall talking quietly. One had his hands in his pockets. Another leaned back against the wall as if he belonged there, as if the war had never existed. A third soldier held something in his hand, a paper cup. Steam rose from it. Ko could smell coffee faintly as she passed. Bitter, warm in Japan. Coffee had become a rumor during the war. Something you heard about, not something you drank. Something that belonged to the world before shortages. She kept walking. Inside the mess hall, breakfast was the same as yesterday. Oatmeal, bread, jam. The smell of warm grain filled the room, a smell that still startled Ko even after months. Warm food had once been an event, a rare moment, a lucky accident. Here it was routine. The women sat at long tables, bowls in front of them, hands wrapped around spoons. They ate quietly, not because they were forbidden to speak, but because their voices had learned restraint. Ko lifted a spoonful of oatmeal and paused. The date sat in her mind like a stone. December 31st, the last day. She could almost hear temple bells, not real, only memory. In Japan, the evening would have been heavy with preparation, food arranged carefully. Not extravagant, not now, not after the war, but still arranged with care. There would have been noodles for long life, a last meal to carry them through the closing hours. She wondered what her mother ate last night, if she ate at all. Ko swallowed, forced the oatmeal down. Across the table, Yuki held her spoon but did not eat. Her hands rested motionless in her lap. Her eyes stared at the bowl as if it belonged to someone else. Ko watched her quietly, then looked away. There were things you did not ask yet, not in the morning, not on a day like this. After breakfast, the women returned to their assigned work. Ko went to the camp hospital. The building was cleaner than any field station she had known. The air smelled of disinfectant and soap. The floors were scrubbed, the instruments were organized, order everywhere. It should have felt comforting. Instead, it made her feel exposed. An American nurse nodded at her as she entered. Helen, the same nurse who always spoke gently even when Ko did not understand every word. Helen handed her a stack of folded bandages. Ko bowed slightly and took them with both hands. The gesture was automatic. Her body did it before her mind did. Helen smiled, not mocking, not indulgent, just acknowledging. Ko took the bandages to the supply cabinet and began sorting. Her fingers moved efficiently, fold, stack, align. She worked the way she worked when she needed to keep her thoughts quiet, but her thoughts would not quiet today. December 31st. In Japan, she would have been closing accounts, making sure debts were paid, making sure apologies were offered, making sure nothing unresolved crossed into the new year. Here nothing closed, nothing concluded. The days simply continued. She glanced toward the window. Outside, the sky was pale and flat. The sun did not feel like it was rising so much as appearing reluctantly. For a moment she imagined the streets of Osaka. Then she remembered the last letter, thin paper, faint ink. We are fortunate if we eat once each day. The sentence returned like a sting. Ko lowered her eyes back to her work. Her hands began to move faster. The morning passed without event. Lunch came, more routine, more warmth, more food. Then in the afternoon, Ko noticed something different. It was small at first, just a shift in sound, a faint echo from outside the hospital door. Voices, laughter, not the contained laughter of women trying not to be heard, not the brittle laughter that sometimes erupted when someone was losing control. This laughter was easy, careless. Young, Ko stepped toward the hospital entrance and looked out. Two American soldiers walked across the compound carrying a wooden crate between them. It looked heavy, their shoulders tensed under the weight, but they were smiling. One of them said something to the other that made him laugh harder. They almost lost their grip. They corrected it quickly and kept going. Behind them, another soldier carried a bundle of paper, rolled tightly. He held it under one arm like a poster. Ko watched, confused. Supplies, perhaps, but the men did not move like men carrying medical supplies. They moved like men preparing for something that mattered. Ko's stomach tightened. Enemies were not supposed to behave like this, not relaxed, not playful, not as if their lives were untouched. She had been taught that Americans were brutal, animalistic, driven by cruelty, that they mocked suffering and enjoyed humiliation. These men were laughing while carrying a crate. Ko stood very still. The cold air brushed her face. The crate passed by. She could not see what was inside. The slats were too tight. A fourth soldier followed them, walking with no burden at all. He whistled softly, a simple melody, not martial, not proud, just casual. Ko felt something inside her recoil, not fear, disorientation. The year was ending, and the enemy was whistling. She returned inside quickly, as if she had been caught watching. In the late afternoon, the women were released from work and returned to the barracks. The sun dropped early. Shadows gathered along the fences. The lights along the recreation hall roof began to glow, small bulbs, red, green, yellow. They had been there for days now, but tonight they looked brighter, as if the camp itself had decided to become more visible. Ko walked with her shoulders tense. The light reflected off frost-covered ground and made the compound look unreal, like a stage, like a set built for someone else's story. Inside the barracks, the women changed into their evening clothing. Simple gray dresses, hair tied back, blankets arranged. The same routine, but the room felt different. Whispers started early. Women gathered in small clusters, not to plan, not to act, only to understand. Fumiko spoke first, her voice low and sharp. "Today is the last day of the year," she said. "They know that. They want us to feel it." Ko looked toward her. Fumiko's posture was rigid, as if tension alone could protect her. Her eyes moved across the room, scanning faces, measuring weakness. Tomoko sat on her bed with her hands folded neatly in her lap, older than most, calm in a way that made younger women uneasy. "Feel what?" Tomoko asked quietly. "Their control," Fumiko replied. "Their ability to celebrate while we remain prisoners." Yuki sat near the wall, her knees drawn up. She stared at her hands as if they belonged to someone else. "Do they celebrate this day?" Yuki asked. Ko realized she had been wondering the same thing, not because she wanted to celebrate, but because she needed to understand the rules of this world. Fumiko scoffed. "Americans celebrate everything," she said. "They celebrate comfort. They celebrate themselves." Tomoko did not react. She only breathed slowly, as if she was listening to something beneath the words. Ko sat on her bed and traced the seam of her blanket with her fingers. Her body remembered Japan's New Year's Eve, the weight of it, the solemnity, the sense that something unseen watched closely during the crossing from one year to the next. She remembered temple bells. 108 strikes to cleanse the human heart of worldly desires. She had never counted them, but she remembered the sound. Here there would be no bells, only the distant radio, only boots on frost. Ko thought of the warnings she had heard before capture. Americans will pretend to be kind, they will smile before they harm you, they enjoy breaking spirits. She had believed those warnings, they had helped her survive. But lately, the warnings felt incomplete, like a story that had been told on purpose with missing pages. Night settled deeper. The barracks lights dimmed, the women lay down, but many did not sleep. The air felt heavier, as if time itself had slowed. Ko stared into the dark, she listened, a laugh somewhere outside, a door closing, boots crunching. A radio turned louder for a moment, then softer again. She imagined her mother if she was awake, if she was sitting in cold darkness, if she was thinking of Ko, if she had any strength left to think. Ko's throat tightened. The year was ending, and Ko was alive, warm, fed, in the enemy's camp. The contradiction made her feel sick. As the night moved toward midnight, the barracks grew quieter, not because the women slept, but because they were listening, waiting for something that never came. In Japan, midnight would have been a shared moment, even in hardship, even in ruin. The year's end would still be marked, acknowledged. Here, midnight was only a number on a clock. Ko did not know the exact time. There was no clock inside the barracks, but she felt it anyway, a deep stillness. The sense of a door closing somewhere far away. She held her breath, as if the air itself might change. Nothing changed. No bell, no announcement, no collective breath released. Only the same cold pressing against the walls. Only the same distant radio. Only the same boots moving along the fence. The year ended without permission. Ko stared into the darkness and felt something inside her shift, small, almost invisible. A realization that did not yet have words. If time could end without ceremony, then meaning was not guaranteed, and if meaning was not guaranteed, then everything she had been taught about what mattered could be questioned. The thought frightened her more than hunger ever had. Ko closed her eyes, not to sleep, only to endure the quiet passage into the next year. Morning arrived too easily. January 1st, 1946. The sun rose as if nothing had happened, as if a year had not just ended, as if the night before had not carried weight. Cold light seeped through the barracks windows, pale and flat. It touched the wooden walls, the floor, the edges of blankets folded with care. Ko opened her eyes and felt the wrongness immediately. Her body recognized the day before her mind did, a tightening in her chest, a readiness she did not need. In Japan, New Year's Day would have arrived heavy with meaning. Quiet, reverent, marked by reflection more than movement. Here the air felt active. Before the bell rang, Ko heard voices outside, more than usual, not urgent, not sharp, energetic. The sound unsettled her. The bell rang at 6:30 a.m., the same sound, the same rhythm, but it did not land the same way. The women rose from their beds, blankets folded, dresses smoothed, hair tied back, routine wrapped around them like armor. Yet as they stepped outside, the difference became impossible to ignore. The compound looked altered, not dramatically, not transformed beyond recognition, but changed enough to disturb the eye. A banner hung near the recreation hall entrance. White cloth, blue letters, Happy New Year. The words were in English, rounded, friendly. Ko stared at them longer than she intended. She did not know every letter, but she recognized enough. Happy New Year. The words felt careless. In Japan, happiness on this day would have been restrained, measured, earned through survival. Here, happiness was announced, displayed, assumed. Small paper streamers hung along the edge of the building. Red, white, blue, American colors. Ko felt her stomach tighten. The women slowed unconsciously as they walked, eyes lifted despite themselves. A few exchanged glances, no one spoke. At breakfast, the disruption continued. The mess hall smelled different, sweeter, richer. On the tables sat plates instead of bowls. On the plates were slices of bread thicker than usual, spread generously with jam. There were small pieces of cake, plain, yellow, dusting of sugar on top. The women stopped at the entrance. Cake did not belong in a prison camp. Cake did not belong to prisoners of war. Cake belonged to birthdays, weddings, celebrations that assumed safety. Ko felt her pulse quicken. The women took their seats slowly, hands hovered above plates. No one reached for the food. The American guards stood along the walls as they often did, but their posture was different, looser, less watchful. One of them smiled when he noticed the hesitation, then quickly looked away as if embarrassed. The translator stepped forward. Today is January 1st, he said, the beginning of a new year. His voice echoed slightly in the hall. In America, this day is about starting again, he continued, looking forward, making plans for the future. The word future settled heavily among the women. Future was not a neutral word. Future was a luxury. Ko thought of Japan, of cities flattened, of families surviving one day at a time. What future were they allowed to imagine? The translator gestured toward the food. Please eat, he said. The women obeyed slowly. Ko picked up a piece of bread. It was warm, soft. Her fingers left faint impressions in it. She hesitated. Across from her, Yuki stared at her plate, eyes wide. Her mouth trembled. This feels wrong, Yuki whispered. Ko nodded slightly. They ate anyway. The cake was sweet, almost painfully so. Sugar hit Ko's tongue and her eyes stung unexpectedly. Sweetness had become unfamiliar during the war, something indulgent, something that demanded justification. Here it was offered casually. As they ate, music drifted through the hall, not military music, not an anthem, something light, rhythmic, upbeat. Ko could not identify the melody, it did not follow the patterns she knew. It felt like movement without purpose, joy without restraint. She felt irritation rise in her chest. How could anyone be joyful now? After breakfast, the women were released to their duties, but the schedule felt loosened. Some were sent back to the barracks instead of to work. Others were given shorter shifts. No explanation was offered. The women gathered in the barracks unsettled. Fumiko stood near the center of the room, arms crossed. "This is intentional," she said sharply. "They are marking the year their way, forcing their meaning onto us." Tomoko sat calmly on her bed. "Meaning exists whether they mark it or not," she replied. Fumiko scoffed. "That is exactly the problem." Yuki sat near the wall, knees drawn close to her chest. "They act like the future belongs to them," she said softly. Ko listened without speaking. She felt torn in a way she could not articulate. In Japan, New Year's Day would have been about humility, about recognizing what had been lost, about endurance. Here, the mood felt forward-facing, optimistic, as if the past could be set aside. The women stepped outside later that morning. The sky was bright, clear. The compound buzzed with low activity. American soldiers stood in small groups talking. Some waved to each other across the yard. One tossed a small object into the air and caught it again. No one shouted, no one barked orders. Ko watched an officer approach a group of soldiers. They straightened slightly, listened. Then the officer said something that made them laugh. Laughter, directed upward. The hierarchy bent. Ko felt something shift inside her. In Japan, authority was rigid, absolute, unquestioned. Here, authority appeared flexible. She did not know what to do with that observation. At midday, a brief gathering was announced near the recreation hall. The women stood together in coats too thin for the cold. The American commander spoke through the translator. He said the war had ended. He said the new year marked rebuilding. He said he hoped the coming months would be peaceful for everyone. He did not mention victory. He did not mention defeat. He looked uncomfortable. The women listened in silence. Peace, the word landed again. Ko felt her throat tighten. Peace felt abstract, unreliable. Peace had never lasted long enough to trust. When the gathering ended, the women returned to the barracks. The rest of the day unfolded slowly. Some women lay on their beds staring at the ceiling. Others whispered in small groups. No one laughed freely. No one cried openly. The celebration did not belong to them. It hovered around them like foreign air. Ko sat on her bed and pressed her hands into her thighs. She felt restless, uneasy. She thought of her mother again, of the last New Year they had spent together. It had been quiet, cold, hungry, but it had been theirs, here. January 1st arrived wrapped in optimism she could not accept. As evening approached, the lights along the recreation hall glowed again, brighter than before. The women watched from the barracks windows. Some turned away, others stared openly. Fumiko shook her head. "They celebrate while our country starves," she said. Tomoko answered softly, "Or perhaps they celebrate because they are allowed to." Yuki hugged her knees tighter. "If they can celebrate, why couldn't we?" she whispered. Question hung heavy. Ko closed her eyes. She realized something then. This new year was not asking for permission. It had arrived anyway, and it carried values that did not align with what she had been taught. Forward instead of inward, hope instead of endurance, joy instead of restraint. The morning had not belonged to them, and neither, it seemed, did the year that followed. January settled into the camp without asking. The days shortened and lengthened again almost without notice. Cold mornings, clear afternoons, evenings that fell too quickly. Routine returned or tried to. The bell rang at 6:30 a.m. Work assignments resumed. Meals arrived on time, but something had shifted. The women moved through the days with a new tension beneath their discipline, not fear, not defiance, awareness. Ko felt it in her body first. Her steps were steadier. Her hands no longer trembled when lifting trays. Her breath came easier when she climbed the short hill toward the hospital. Strength had returned to her muscles quietly, without permission. She noticed it one morning as she tied her shoes. Her fingers moved quickly, confidently. That confidence startled her. During the war, strength had been survival, painful, earned through deprivation. Here, strength arrived through care. That difference unsettled her more than weakness ever had. The American nurses continued their work as they always did. Calm, methodical, they spoke of small things, weather, food, plans for when their shifts ended. Future crept into their conversations without hesitation. Ko listened while folding bandages, her hands moving automatically. One nurse talked about returning home in the spring. Another mentioned visiting her parents. Simple statements, assumptions. The war to them already felt distant. Ko wondered how that was possible. For her, the war still lived in her body, in the way she flinched at sudden sounds, in the way she counted supplies instinctively, in the way hunger still haunted her thoughts even while she ate. At lunch, the women gathered quietly as they always had, bowls in hand, eyes lowered, but the food tasted different now, not because it had changed, but because it carried weight. Ko lifted her spoon and paused. Across from her, Yuki stared at her plate, unmoving. "Do you feel it too?" Yuki asked softly. Ko nodded. "Every bite feels like a choice," Yuki continued. Ko did not answer because she understood. In Japan, eating had been obligation, a necessity. Here, eating felt like participation. Participation in a system that contradicted everything they had been taught. Letters began arriving more frequently. Thin envelopes, carefully censored, heavy with unspoken truths. Ko recognized her mother's handwriting immediately when her letter arrived. It had changed, once graceful, now uneven, as if the pen itself had grown tired. Ko sat on her bed and unfolded the paper slowly. "My dear Ko," the words blurred for a moment before she forced herself to continue. "Tokyo has not recovered. Food is scarce. Your father's cough worsens. We are fortunate if we eat once each day." Ko read the sentence again and again. Her chest tightened until breathing felt difficult. She folded the letter carefully and placed it beside her bed. That evening she could not eat. The plate sat untouched in front of her, meat, vegetables, bread, warm. She pushed it away quietly. No one commented. Around her, similar scenes unfolded. Some women ate everything in silence, driven by hunger that refused to be denied. Others stopped halfway, hands trembling. Food was no longer simple. It had become a mirror. The guilt arrived gradually, not as a wave, as a fog. It settled in the barracks, in the hospital corridors, at the tables. It appeared in small behaviors: bread left unfinished, blankets pulled tighter than necessary, eyes lowered when guards passed. The Americans noticed. They did not react. They did not reduce portions. They did not speak of gratitude. They did not alter their behavior. They simply continued. The consistency made it worse. If kindness had been fleeting, the women might have dismissed it as strategy, as performance, but it was not fleeting. It endured. One afternoon, Ko stumbled while carrying folded linens down the hospital corridor. The stack slipped from her arms and scattered across the floor. Her heart raced. In Japan, such clumsiness would have earned punishment, a sharp word, a strike. She dropped to her knees immediately, hands moving to gather the fallen cloth. She waited for anger. Instead, she heard laughter, not cruel, not mocking, light. An American doctor knelt beside her, collecting the linens. "Happens to everyone," he said gently. Ko did not understand the words, but she understood the tone. He was not angry. He handed the linens back to her and stood, offering a brief salute before walking away, whistling softly. Ko remained kneeling long after he left. An officer had knelt to help her, an enemy officer. The moment stayed with her. Another disruption came through Yuki. She returned to the barracks one evening holding a letter, her hands shaking. "It came today," she said softly. Ko sat beside her. "They are alive," Yuki continued, "but they are starving." Her voice broke. Ko closed her eyes. The war had not ended for Japan. It had only changed shape. That night the arguments began. Fumiko stood near the center of the barracks, arms crossed tightly. "You are forgetting who you are," she said sharply. "They are feeding us so we forget." Yuki sat upright on her bed. "They are feeding us because we need to eat," she replied. "That is how it begins," Fumiko snapped. "Gratitude becomes obedience." Tomoko spoke calmly. "Obedience to what?" she asked. Fumiko turned on her. "To their version of history, their version of morality." Ko listened, heart pounding. "Perhaps our version was incomplete," Tomoko said quietly. The room went still. Fumiko's eyes flashed. "Careful," she warned. Tomoko did not look away. "I watched officers beat soldiers for mistakes," she said. "I watched men sent to die without reason. That was cruelty." Silence followed. Yuki pressed her hands into her blanket. "They destroyed our cities," she said. "They killed civilians." "Yes," Tomoko replied. "And that truth does not disappear because they are kind here." The argument stalled. No one had an answer that resolved both realities. Two opposing truths existed at once. The same nation that burned cities now provided warmth. The same soldiers who fought brutal battles now handed out blankets. The women had been taught the world was simple: enemy or ally, honor or shame, victory or death. This new year refused simplicity. Physical changes became impossible to ignore. The women gained weight. Their skin regained color. Their hair grew thicker. When they caught their reflections in windows or mirrors, some did not recognize themselves. Tomoko stood in the washroom one morning studying her face. "I look like I did before the war," she whispered. Then she turned away. Health felt like theft. To be well fed while family starved, to be warm while parents shivered. This was torment of a different kind, not physical, psychological. Ko felt it most acutely in moments of quiet. She caught her reflection one afternoon in the glass door of a supply cabinet. She froze. The woman staring back looked young, alive, healthier than she had ever been during the war, healthier than she had been as a free citizen. The realization struck like a blow. The enemy had restored her through care. Her hands began to tremble, her breath shortened. She slid down against the wall, tears breaking free without restraint, not polite, not controlled. Deep sobs tore from her chest. Nurse Helen found her minutes later. She did not rush to speak. She did not touch her. She sat beside Ko on the floor. After a long time, Helen spoke softly. "It is all right to feel angry," she said. "You were lied to." Ko did not understand every word, but she understood enough. Compassion needed no translation. Her worldview cracked further. The Americans had not broken them through cruelty. They were breaking them through kindness, and that was far more destabilizing. January continued, relentlessly. The calendar pages changed, but the camp remained. Snow came and melted. Frost softened into damp ground. The bell rang at 6:30 a.m. as it always had, yet nothing felt the same. The women moved differently now, not slower, not faster, heavier. Each day carried a quiet reckoning. Each gesture held memory. Each kindness echoed longer than it should have. Ko felt it most in silence. She woke before the bell, as she always had. But she no longer lay still waiting. She sat up. She breathed. Her body was no longer bracing for harm. That realization frightened her. Fear had once been a companion, a warning, a protector. Without it, she felt exposed. Work in the hospital continued. Bandages folded, instruments cleaned, supplies logged, but Ko now noticed what she had once ignored. The American nurses questioned instructions, not loudly, not defiantly. They asked why. They suggested alternatives. They adjusted routines when something did not work. Authority was present, but it was not absolute. Ko watched these exchanges with growing unease. In Japan, questioning was dangerous. Here it was ordinary. She did not know which truth frightened her more. Conversations in the barracks grew sharper as January wore on. The women no longer avoided the tension, they pressed against it. Fumiko remained steadfast. "This kindness is calculated," she insisted. "They want us changed." Tomoko met her gaze evenly, "And if we are changed," she asked, "what does that mean?" Yuki's exhaustion showed plainly now, dark circles beneath her eyes, hands that trembled even at rest. "I don't know who I am supposed to hate anymore," she admitted one night. The room fell quiet because hatred had once been simple, now it required effort. Rumors of repatriation began circulating in late January. Quietly at first, then more openly. The war was over. Occupation had begun. Arrangements were being made. The women expected joy, home, family, Japan. Instead, dread settled in their chests. Ko lay awake at night staring at the ceiling. What waited for her in Japan? Her mother's letters spoke of hunger, of illness, of homes reduced to scrap shelters. The Japan she remembered no longer existed, and she would return healthy, fed, changed. How would she explain that? Yuki voiced what many felt one evening. "I am afraid to go home," she said softly. Ko turned toward her. "Because you prefer this place?" Ko asked. Yuki nodded. "And because saying that feels like betrayal." The word betrayal carried weight. They had been taught that loyalty demanded suffering, that endurance proved virtue, but endurance had only consumed them. Some women began asking American officers if it was possible to stay. The answer was always the same: no. International law required repatriation. Still, the fact that they asked revealed how deeply they had shifted. These women, once taught that death was better than surrender, now begged to remain with their former enemies rather than return home. The propaganda had promised the Americans would break them. In a way, it had been right, but not through cruelty, through example, through the quiet demonstration that life could be different. February passed, then March. The camp prepared for departures. Paperwork, medical examinations, lists read aloud through translators, names, dates, destinations. Ko packed her belongings carefully. There were not many: clothing, letters, a few personal items. At the bottom of her bag, wrapped in thin paper, rested the bar of soap. She had never used it. She did not know why, but it felt wrong to consume it. The soap was not cleanliness, it was evidence. The ships departed in April of 1946. The women stood on deck as the American coastline faded into the distance. Some cried openly. Others stood silent, gripping the railings. Ko watched the shore shrink. She did not wave. She felt no gratitude that could be spoken, no anger that could be released, only awareness. The journey across the Pacific took weeks. Conditions were not luxurious, but they were humane. When the coast of Japan finally appeared, the women crowded forward. What they saw stole their breath. Ruins, cities flattened, harbors choked with wreckage. As they passed Hiroshima, devastation stretched endlessly. A whole city erased. They docked at Yokohama. Children begged along the pier. Adults searched through debris. Ko stepped onto Japanese soil and felt no joy, only sorrow. Her family greeted her with relief that quickly shifted to confusion. "You look healthy," her mother said carefully. Ko nodded. "The Americans treated you well." Ko could not speak, because she heard what remained unspoken. "You ate while we starved. You were warm while we froze." The guilt she had carried in America felt light compared to this. Years passed. Japan rebuilt, slowly, painfully. Ko became a nurse, not because she wanted status, but because she had seen care practiced without cruelty. She treated patients gently, listened carefully, questioned instructions when they caused harm. She never married. She devoted her life to care. She kept the American nursing textbooks Helen had given her, their pages worn thin from use. Sometimes she remembered that first New Year, the banner, the cake, the disorientation, the moment she realized the world was larger than she had been allowed to believe. Yuki married an American soldier during the occupation. Her family disapproved. She did not care. She raised children who spoke 2 languages. She taught them that identity could be shared. Tomoko returned to her children and taught them to question authority, to recognize propaganda. Fumiko never changed, or perhaps she changed in ways no one saw. She returned to Japan and lived quietly. The shame was too heavy for many of the women to speak publicly of their captivity, so they did not, but privately they passed the lessons on, that the enemy is not always who you are told it is, that kindness can destabilize more deeply than violence, that dignity does not come from sacrifice demanded by the state, it comes from recognizing the humanity of others. In her later years, Ko told her niece the story. The young woman listened quietly. "So the Americans were good to you?" she asked. Ko shook her head. "It is not that simple," she replied. "They were capable of great destruction and also great mercy." "Both are true." She paused. "It was their mercy that changed me because it forced me to see clearly." She looked out at the modern city. The lesson had been painful, but it had been worth learning, because it reminded her that the real battlefield is not between nations, it is between ideas. One sees people as tools, the other sees them as human beings, and sometimes the most powerful weapon is not force, but kindness. If you found this story compelling, make sure to subscribe for more.